Evolutionary Org Hardcore 2.0 is coming your way. This is episode 138. Today we're going to talk about top steroid cycles for those 50 plus years presented by Beligas. So in a previous episode, we talked about, under 30. Now we're going to talk about over 50. And at the end of the day, Mobster and I are going to discuss aging and training effects on your body over age 50. Mobster is over age 50. I'm approaching 50. Before we know it, Mobster is going to be approaching 70 and I'm going to be approaching 55, 60 myself. So very, very important. Even if you're not anywhere close to 50, this is something to think about as you get older. Maybe you got an uncle or dad who wants to get into steroids. This is a great episode to listen to help them out. We're going to talk about what the age 50 plus demographic wants. What do they want out of their steroid use? What do they want out of their training? Specific cycles to use, and we're going to talk about Beligas Quality Products. This is a great brand that we started talking about in the past few months, and they are really worth your time. So let's first start about aging and training effects on your body over age 50. So I'll start a little bit before I bring in Mobster. So one of the things that happens when I was a kid, I used to watch sports, and I'd get so upset, Mobster, because my favorite athlete would retire. And I know a lot of people over the years, I can remember in school, Michael Jordan,
Yeah.
which everybody knows, when he retired, I think the story was his father got murdered and he quit the NBA. He just didn't have his heart into it anymore. I can remember in school, there were kids literally crying about it, you know? And, it was such a big deal that they retired. And then he came back and then he retired again. And again, there were kids crying about it. But what happens is you get older, your skill set drops, things change. The young bucks, are getting faster than you, are getting stronger than you, are getting quicker than you. And things happen to your body. Your body starts breaking down. So I can remember too, as a kid, some of my favorite athletes when they would retire, I'd get upset. Like I thought they were invincible. I thought they'd be playing for years and years and years. They were 50, 60 years old. But what happens is once they hit 30, 35, things start happening to their bodies. Once they hit closer to 40, things really fall off the rail. There has been very few handful of guys who you can say, wow, they're over 35, over 40, and they're still kicking ass. We've seen athletes completely fall off a cliff, whether it be any sport out there, soccer, football, hockey, baseball, whatever, in bodybuilding. Bodybuilders tend to start falling off a cliff a little later because bodybuilding isn't so much of an impact sport as some of these other sports, but it is an impact sport in that you're impacting these weights. These weights are impacting your joints and having an effect on your soft tissues and that sort of thing. So it's an impact sport in a different way. But with bodybuilding, it's like the longer you do it, the more muscle memory and muscle tissue you build up over time, where it gives you an advantage. This is why you see Mr. Olympia champions who are in their late 30s and into their 40s because they have the experience and they have the knowledge and they have the muscle memory and body memory that they built up. But even in their case, they'll be good, they'll be good, they'll be good, and then they'll fall off a cliff. Ronnie Coleman, Jay Cutler, these guys, Arnold, these guys that were winning year in and year out, eventually what happened was they got older and things started changing in their body. So it's the wear and tear. I've interviewed ortho guys, osteos, all these doctors, professionals that deal with this stuff, and they all have that to say. They say, look, it's wear and tear. You pound your body for years, and what ends up happening is your body tears up. Now, the advantage to bodybuilding, a lot of people don't start bodybuilding to their teenage years. But when it comes to other sports like baseball or hockey or football or soccer, whatever, they start playing much younger, 4 or 5 years old. These guys start playing, these sports. So they start wearing out a little earlier. That might be a little bit of a little bit of an equity there on their age that they start a little earlier. So at the end of the day, you start pounding. Now you add steroids to the equation, and steroids help you do more weight. That puts even more pressure on your soft tissues and joints. You see, your spine health, you start getting herniated discs, you start tearing things because you're doing so much weight. You're overhead pressing 250, 300 pounds. Yes, that's going to affect your disc in your spine. They're going to affect your shoulders. You're going to get little micro tears into your soft tissues. That's what's going to happen. So things start changing as you get older. So we're going to kind of talk a lot about that. So Mobster, tell me specifically in your situation,
Yeah.
aging and training effects on your body, and how the hell have you continued to be so strong?
In my case, I mean, look, let me start with injuries and whatever else, right? Absolutely. I've told this story a few times, as regular listeners will know. Just a few years pre-COVID, Steve, 2016, I had to take 16 weeks off, and this was down to a back injury. And the general consensus of the various doctors, etc., I think I saw different local GPs at my local surgery, 5 different doctors in as many weeks, just getting the pain meds sorted out. I went to Mountain Ash Hospital. They do a walk in. I got seen. I did therapy there, did therapy at home. And the general consensus was just wear and tear on my spine. And I'd had injuries before that lasted a few days. And the main thing, of course, was I was pushing my body. I was competing, especially pre 2016. I think my last serious competition would be around that time or just before, maybe just after. But that was kind of what I was doing. And you can't. Here's the thing, and I've said this before as well, Steve. I was doing, especially when I competed, stuff that was world class. Some of the stuff, even if it's not what you would call traditional powerlifting or strongman or whatever, because it was grip specific, was really, really, really stupidly heavy weights. And the problem you have, and this applies to any athlete that's breaking a record, whether it's the long jump, throwing a javelin, kicking a ball, playing soccer for 40 years when everybody else has a 20-year career, whatever else. The reality of the situation is if you are into world record, British record, American record, European record, international record, world record territory, you are arguably doing something that no one else on the whole fucking planet prior to you doing it has done. And part of that is the risk of injury. I am, as any athlete, and certainly I am when I was doing this stuff, doing something that the risk of injury can come at any time. I might be doing something where I might just tear a callus on my hand, or I might just strain myself. As an example, a very, very strong younger athlete, Chris James, was so bloody strong. He was doing one particular exercise that was coming up in a British Championships, which I won. It has to be said, 2008, 2009, whatever. And he was essentially bent over Rome with one arm, something called the V bar lift, the 1 inch V bar lift. And the problem with the 1 inch V bar lift is that when you picked it up, like picking a pipe up off the ground, Steve, vertically, it had a tendency to rotate. And when you're bent over rowing, your bicep is in that position. And as it rotates under stress, you're more likely to get a bicep tear. And he got a bicep tear on the day of the. I'm laughing; it wasn't funny. On the day of the competition, you only had to pick the weight 2 inches off the floor. It didn't matter if you stood up or you did it bent over. It was just it had to come 2 inches off the floor. And the way that he'd been doing it in training was putting stress on his body, and his bicep tore. People heard it snap. We had to strap him up, stick him in his car, and send him back to South Wales. I was living in Gloucester at the time. So he was essentially one arm rowing or doing a one arm kind of row with 160, 170 kilograms, which is 350, 360 pounds. So basically, that's the reason why. I was doing, I think I got the British record at some point, but I was anticipating the twist. I would start from a twist position, so it ended up in a neutral position when I finished, and so on. Now, he was late 30s, early 40s. The reality of the situation is your ability to recover just takes longer to recover from epic sessions. You have already, if you've been lifting for a few years, essentially done the same levels of stress that everybody else has done, except the younger guy has just started, whereas you're 10 or 15 years in. So whether it's soccer or weightlifting or bodybuilding, you have a lot more miles on the clock. We use an analogy sometimes, you and I, Steve, when I talk about sports cars, and I say that if we are good athletes in whatever regard, we are like a highly tuned Italian sports car. And the reality of the situation is a new sports car, once it's been running, is fine. It's got 1,000 miles on the clock. Our car, the 50-year-old plus car, has got 100,000 miles on the clock. It's not just running, Steve. Whole shit needs replacing if it was a car. And if it was a car, we would probably replace the engine, the brakes, the suspension. We might have replaced the body. It's barely the fucking car that it started at. But in a human being, we can't do that. It's the same goddamn car. And even if we take excellent fucking care of it, even if we've had injuries and had to do rehab like me, or we've had some of the time, just last week or the week before in the forum, we had a guy that had an actual pictures of the surgery that he'd had on his shoulder, showing you the internal stitching before they closed the wound up. The doctors took pictures for him. So the reality of the situation is there's a lot more miles on the clock in terms of wear and tear. Your ability to recover from the stresses of training is harder. Your there might be nuances in the diet. I could eat fucking anything when I was younger. I can't eat everything now, and so on and so forth. The way that I've adapted is I choose. I realized there was a psychological aspect, Steve. At some point, some of my records, not all of them, but some of my records, the majority of my records, will be broken. A young buck will come along, and that could be a bit of a head fuck. So the records that won't be broken is because the rules have changed. So they never go back. It can't be broken. And then you've got things like Steve's asked me to talk about deloading, and I'll tell you what I've done, Steve. I'll talk about that as well. I've literally set myself challenges that are within my ability to do now, rather than try to be the person I was when I was 30 or 40. If I carried on trying to do the stuff that I used to do, I think that would be injury prone and a bit of a head fuck. Now, what we do see in training and the deloading thing is, I don't really do it as such specifically. I'll talk about cycling in terms of strength as well. But what you see in training, and this applies to the late 30s, early to mid 40s, up to the 50s, where there are a few weeks, especially when you're on cycle, but even when you're off, when you can push relatively hard, then you'll hit a wall, you'll feel a little bit overtrained, and rather than completely change what you're doing, completely change your diet, completely change your gym work or whatever else, you actually incorporate roughly, it's about every 4 weeks, Steve, a deload week, where you would deliberately drop poundages by 15, 20, sometimes as high as 30%, do either the same volume or less, just for a week, just to give your body, for want of a better phrase, the ability to catch up. Something that I do, and this doesn't apply to bodybuilders, but you might think of it in this way, guys. So it's a useful tool for you 40 plus, 50 plus athletes, is I'm not balls out all year. I think roughly 3 times a year, you will see me come on the forums, check out my logs, and you will see me doing some fucked up shit. Whether it's a stupidly heavy bench press or stupidly heavy squat or trying to break some sort of PR and another exercise for myself because I want to, whatever. Whether it's high repetitions, I think 14 reps with a 200-pound dumbbell on fairly loose hammer curls, or trying to bench, as I hopefully will do this Friday, Steve, 550 pounds, if it's a super duper slingshot that I'm using, or maybe even 600 pounds by the end of February, again using that particular slingshot. I won't lift like that all year. It's impossible to do. You can get away with a lot more pushing and a lot more inroad into your recovery when you're younger versus when you're older. And so you find that by injury and wear and tear and recovery, that you have to back the fuck off. You have to. I'm also, as I said to Steve in a pre-show, arguably, with my size and my strength, an outlier. I'm very fortunate that I found my particular niche, and I'm incredibly fortunate that I'm able to do some of the things that I do. One of the things I also said to Steve in the pre-show is that I'll refer to a lot of my older buddies that train locally, either in person that I see at the gym or that I talk to in training online and whatever else, Steve, where, and this is what we're going to sort of segue into now, Steve, the what 50 plus athletes want.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
So
I'll
let me
let you
finish.
start on this one
Yeah.
and I'll come back in for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me finish up on the other topic. And look, I went from my mid 20s. I talked about it on the podcast. I did triathlons and then I transitioned back to weight training, and then transitioned to powerlifting. And this was something that happened from when I was in my mid 20s to my late 30s. So it was about almost 15 years of number one priority in life was my training for much of that. And I think the longest I ever took without training was 2 weeks because I made a 6.5 hour move across my state and I had to move. I was doing the move on my own. I had a couple people come help me unload the truck, but I did the entire move on my own. I drove a 26-foot truck with a trailer with my car on the back trailer, just completely left where I was living and moved. I had a girlfriend at the time living in another city, so I moved to her, and we moved in together in a house. And I had to, unpack everything, get the utilities going, focus on work, and do everything and have everything in order, and then look for a gym. So by the time all that happened, trust me, the moving itself was a workout in itself. If you've ever moved before, it's not fun. But in the end, that was the longest I took was that 2 weeks where I didn't train. So that's a lot of wear and tear on the body. So one of the things that really was an effect on my body was my spine. You have this in your back and your neck, and just imagine a ice cream sandwich, and you press each side of the ice cream sandwich as hard as you can, and you see that the middle part where the ice cream is gets you know gets on each side of it, squeezes out. That's what happens when you did and with your disc when you're weight training. So one of the things that I had to transition to was doing a better job with maintenance on my body. And what happened was I started doing the inversion table, which I've touched on a lot. And the inversion table, you can go on Amazon and buy one for $150, a really good one for $150. They're not expensive in the last few years. So what the inversion table is, you get into it and you basically flip upside down, and that helps decompress your back. It really works well. So that was something important I did. And then the one thing that I highly recommend is hot yoga. And the reason you want to do hot yoga is because you're in a hot room and you're able to stretch a lot more. So with the hot yoga, it really helps lubricate your joints and it helps stretch out your spine and it helps decompress everything and it increases your flexibility. So these are important things to start doing before you get 50. But if you haven't been doing them, there's no bad time to start. And these are very important things to do because flexibility will help decrease the chance of injury. And you want to keep your spine and your discs are in good health. Otherwise, you're going to end up with pinched nerves, and that's going to be a very bad thing. I had a pinched nerve, and I wasn't doing the proper maintenance on my body and I was not listening to my body. And basically, what ends up happening is you start getting pain going down your arms. And in my case, my pinky finger would be numb, and that's because the herniated discs in my neck or in my back basically are causing those nerves to just to go, causing my arm to get numb and my pinky finger to be numb. So these are serious things. And once these injuries start happening, they become chronic and it becomes an issue. So it's important to do the maintenance on your body. And it's important to do these little things beforehand. And then once you get mobster's age, you can still be able to grind in the gym. So it's also important to change your style of training. And sometimes, I can remember getting into my car and going to the gym and just stopping and turning back around. I'd be like, look, I shouldn't be training today. My body's too beat down. My shoulder's not feeling well. My neck isn't feeling well. If I go train, it's not going to help me. It's going to hurt me. So you don't want to end up in that situation. So please make sure you're doing the proper maintenance on your body, because if you got to start when you're young. Flexibility starts when you're young. And if you haven't started doing it enough, then you're not. If you go to any youth sports, I don't care if it's football, soccer, hockey, whatever, they do warm ups, they do stretching. This is part of it. And this is part of what they do. So then when the athletes get older, they're flexible. And when they get into the college, high school, college, pros, they spend a lot of time warming up and stretching before their games, before practice. It's extremely important. So if they're doing it, there's no reason for you guys not to do it. But most weightlifters, they show up to the gym, they go inside, they put their stuff away in their locker, and then they go start hitting the weights. They don't warm up properly, and they surely, after the gym, they leave and they go about their day. They don't take the time to stretch. Very few take the time to stretch. And this is a huge mistake. You should be stretching after every single workout. I started
Yeah.
stretching after every single workout about 5 or 6 years ago. And I've been able to prevent further injuries because of that. But unfortunately, the injuries that I sustained before are things that are going to have to carry with me the rest of my life. So by the time I get mobster's age, who knows what's going to happen, because I didn't take care of my body enough and I didn't maintain my body. So please take my advice and realize when you're in your 20s and your 30s, maintenance is important. Just like a car, you don't maintain your car properly, you don't maintain your pool properly, you don't maintain your air condition properly, it's going to
Yeah.
break and it's going to cost you more money in the long term. So make sure
Let,
you
let-
take
let
care of
me
yourself.
let
Yeah.
me segue. There's one thing, Steve, as you were talking, that occurs to me, and this especially applies to our American audience, which is the majority listening right now. Those of you, male or female, that are training are arguably 10% of the population, both in America and here in the UK and elsewhere for that matter. And that means there's roughly 40 million Americans, there or thereabouts, that work out, train, do some sort of keep fit. Your The reality is that your medical cost, your medical insurance will be better. The amount of prescribed medication that you're on will be less. You might still have some issues, but certainly less than your friends and family, etc., that are 50 plus that don't work out or don't eat properly. Your ability to do shit, whether that's going to the beach or nailing a nail into the wall so you can hang a picture or whatever, Steve, is just that much better. I'd argue that the 50 plus generation, male or female, that look after themselves and train are way less likely to be type 2 diabetics, way less likely to be obese or have fat on their frames and so on. So that's number one. Number two, and I want to touch on this, there's a couple of ways that Steve and I discussed in the pre show. One is basically just being healthy and having muscle tone and wanting to look good. And that's the same with your 19, 20, 30, 35, 40, and of course 50. Looking good, filling out a suit, being healthy is fucking awesome. It really is. Knowing that you're fitter and stronger than the next lady or the next man is fucking awesome. It's like money in the bank, Steve. Not every person wants to be a 300-pound muscular freak, Mr. Olympia or Miss Olympia or whatever, right? But the idea for a woman being able to fit into certain dresses, still look great, still have a tight ass, and all the usual stuff that the younger woman, and being able to do that when you're 40 and 50 is fucking awesome. And the idea that that suit that you was when you was a young buck and you was kicking off in the office and taking names in your legal firm or whatever the fuck you were doing back in the day, or even working in a factory as you might blue collar, never mind white collar. The idea that you can do that when you're 50 plus is It's literally like having money in the bank, Steve. It's like knowing that all your bills are paid for and there's money left out. I feel good, right? So the idea that for me, and I'll just use me and Steve as an example. Simple fact of Steve being 40 odd and me being 60 odd is, and knowing that Steve's got a six pack and knowing that he's in shape and knowing that he feels great and healthy, and me knowing that I can do 3 plates any fucking time I fucking want on the bench press or whatever, it's just money in the bank, Steve. Right. So some, and I'll use my buddies at the gym as an example, and then we'll take a slightly more no approach that Steve and I talked about. So the reasons why some of our 50 plus listeners, a demographic that are listening to this show right now, will be, as per my buddies at the gym, still dating in a case, in a couple of examples, still kicking ass at work in another one or two examples, carrying on habits of a lifetime. I think one of them's an ex-soldier, Steve. So he's probably done some sort of physical thing when he was a younger soldier. I've seen the pictures. He was in the Royal Welsh Regiment. One of the other fellas who just started dating, I mean, literally recently after his wife passed away. One of the other fellas literally still traveling up and down the country working on the electrical infrastructure, the national electrical infrastructure, and he's still doing that. And he only got married the year before last. So those blokes, arguably, those fellas will be relatively young at heart. There are a bunch of, not a load, but there are some 40 plus year old women and one or two olders. I think we got one or two older 50-year-old ladies, and they're just maintaining their shape. So, and I would argue that the great and vast majority of 50 plus listeners, male or female, that's what you want to do. Not everybody wants to have 23-inch arms and veins, etc. And especially when you're 50 plus, because it's incredibly difficult, like Steve said at the beginning of the show. There are some, and this is where we're going to talk about both approaches. And we've seen this on the forums, which is why we mentioned it. Occasionally, a 50 plus, 52, 53, I think we've seen 56 and 57, Steve, and even the odd one or two 60-year-olds like myself have come onto the forum and they are sick and tired of feeling like beaten up old men physically, not literally. They're not getting punched in the street or anything daft, but they're sick and tired of being out of shape. If they go to the bar with their buddies, they got their head down, they're feeling a little bit sort of ignored and whatever, right? And we've talked about TRT, and I've actually got TRT when we're going to discuss cycles and dosing and so on and so forth for the 50 plus. The simple facts, and when you're talking about TRT, Steve, is for some people, it is a fucking transformation. You go from worn out from work, from divorces, from your kids, from grandchildren, from not being able to do stuff around the house like you used to be able to do. So you decide to keep fit, you start going to the gym, you start getting some advice, maybe a proper sensible person, maybe they're listening to these shows, coming on a forum, start cleaning up their diet, able to fit into trousers they haven't been able to fit in for years, but there's still something missing. And we go, let's get your bloods done. And you realize that your testosterone is half what it used to be when you were 30. And when you were 30, you were kicking ass, you were taking names, you were shagging everything and so on, Steve. And it can be a bit of a midlife crisis. But even if it isn't, even if it's just having a sense of how you used to feel, TRT can be a fucking game changer. So talk about what we've seen in that regard, Steve, when we talk about that sort of extreme wanting to feel fucking amazing with testosterone.
Yeah, and look, anti-aging is a growing business. And we started seeing these commercials. I know in America, we started seeing these commercials. Uh, I mean, I'd say 5, 10 years ago, where the guy's standing out there next to this hot chick, and he's like smiling and she's smiling and they're so happy, and he's like, wow, I went to this clinic, and I feel young again, my libido is incredible, and then she's like smiling next to him, and they show this guy who's like this tall jock looking guy with abs and stuff. So it's like looking at one of those resort advertisements, where you see everybody like sitting around the pool smiling, everyone's has a drink in their hand, everyone's having a good time, So That's basically the the advertisement for it. But in reality, as Mobster said, most people they get into their 50s and they just are worn out. They're worn out physically, mentally, stress, overstress. We live an overstressed lifestyle and they want to feel young again. They want to feel the libido they felt like when they were young, and they get a little taste of it when you use anabolic steroids. Like, so if you go and you get Beligas, and we're going to talk about the compounds in a second, specific cycles, but you go and you order Beligas products, whether it be their HGH, which we're going to talk about, whether it be, as Mobster said, getting on a low dose of testosterone for TRT, whether it be going on a moderate cycle, or whether it be pushing things where you're like, well, I want to set new PRs. I love going into the gym at 50, 55 years old, or even 60 years old, and getting next to some 20, 25-year old who could be my grandkid and doing 350 pounds while they're struggling to do two plates. I want to feel that feeling that I felt when I was younger of unlimited energy throughout the day where I could do anything I wanted, and physically felt amazing and in the bedroom, in the gym, in at work, everything. So they want to feel that way. So anabolic steroids give you that ability to really take things to the next level.
Yeah.
And I don't know any 50 plus person who says, "Yeah,
Feel
I want
old,
to
be old,
yeah,
be
I want to be old."
decrepit.
No, they want to feel younger. Everyone wants to feel younger and go back to how they
Yeah.
felt when they were younger. So you don't appreciate it when you're younger. There's
Yes.
these sci-fi movies all the time where the
Mm.
person reverses ages, or they're trying to find the fountain of youth, or they find the fountain of youth and then
Cocoon was one, Steve, where they had those
yeah.
egg things and they all felt amazing and the old people were shiny eyed at each other and so on. It just occurred to me while you were talking, to put it crudely, Steve, I got more ass when I was 50 plus than I did before. And I had times in my life, like any man
Well,
or woman.
In Britain you can pay for it though, right?
Yeah, but I'm not even talking about CRT. I'm just thinking about dating. I've dated, obviously, the same as everybody else, many times over the years. And I think there was times in my typically most men physically mature, your strongest, your healthiest, etc., etc., etc. You and I discussed on a recent show when we talked about the under 30, and I believe I lived with a woman for some years and dated probably every couple of years and so on and so forth, and that would be my mid 30s, and then I went for what might be called a dry spell when I was competing and didn't pay much attention to dating. And when I came up here, I went crazy again. In the Arrived here in 2012 and found plenty of fish, as many people did in 2013, and went absolutely crazy. And that would be when I was in my early 50s, or just turned 50. So yeah, just as a point, Steve, honestly, and the ability, training, confidence from training, knowing what I'd done in the past, and as Steve says, testosterone and some of the options. And look, guys, we've seen examples, both when especially when we talked about TRT, and I've used this analogy before, and I said it very much comes down to how you respond to testosterone, and specifically HRT, TRT, because it's essentially the same thing. You're putting chemicals into the body to rejuvenate yourself. You don't suddenly become 19. There's still certain physical things going on, but the sense of worth, the way that some, and I'm going to use extreme examples, some fellas, some men, and occasionally women with HRT, it can honestly be a psychological as well as a physical transformation. Now, we're not out there trying to sell you the idea of TRT. This is not every single person. Most people, the majority of users of TRT and HRT, will have benefits. That's the whole goddamn reason for taking it. What I'm talking about here is the more extreme transformations. And I would argue, Steve, it's more psychological than necessarily physical. They're going to get the same levels of testosterone as the other person. but the way that they respond to that testosterone is what I'm talking about. So, as an example, we've talked about people that lead in sales teams, politicians, captains of industry. I think we used to use in the early adverts. These were all examples. And the idea was that when you were 30 something years of age, you were hungry, you were lean, you were mean, you were doing whatever the fuck it took. And I'm just using a salesman as an example. You had the most sales on your area. You sold more freezers than anybody else. You sold more air conditioning plants than anybody else. You was absolutely killing it. And then your missus had more kids, there's college fees to pay, you got injured from playing golf, whatever. Testosterone levels started to drop. Your diet started to get shit. You was only eating snacks when you were doing all this ass kicking. And over the next 10 years, you became a little old middle-aged man. And then you discovered TRT and HRT, using, for example, as we talked about, especially we were talking about self-HRT and TRT, you discovered Beligas testosterone products to do TRT on. And we're going to talk about cycles as well. For some users, it's like being 30 all over again. Sex drive, the missus is like, what the fuck's happened to you? We got down to once a week and that was fine. And now it's like 3 times a week, 4 times a week. You're like you're in your 30s again. You're out there playing golf and betting on who's going to win like you used to do when you're 30. If you're still a salesman, you're trying to keep up with the young guys. You know, you're in the bar talking shit and no one's allowed to push you around. You even walk differently, Steve. Some of these guys have described walking around with their heads down and feeling like a sort of, to use a common phrase now, a beater or a sip or whatever. And then they feel like an alpha. Chest is up, head is up, grooming gone because they pay more attention, they're making more eye contact. You know, they're pushing for car parking spaces. Just the naturally slightly aggressive, slightly more assertive stuff that you used to be like and probably didn't even pay attention to when you were 30 something. And you've got some, as Steve said, an essence, a taste of that back. We're not talking about, it's not like some sort of waving a magic wand in a movie, Steve. It's not a complete and utter transformation. You don't suddenly stop having grey hair and go back to dark hair. You don't suddenly grow 2 inches taller or whatever. But it's how you feel and how you sort of put yourself out. Your self-worth, your value in yourself seems to go up for some users. And even those users, it's just moderate changes. And I'm still only talking about TRT and HRT here. It's definitely for, I would say, for the majority of people, Steve, and even I had an effect, and I didn't think I would, knocking 5 or 10 years off. I've got a reasonable, and I'm not going to be completely crude, but I've got a reasonably healthy libido, certainly for a man of my age. I know how often, and I'll put it slightly crudely, I want to knock one out, or fuck, or whatever. And I waited until just short of my 60th birthday and put myself on self TRT, 200 milligrams of test cypionate a week. And again, you've got great cypionate-ish products from Beligas available to you listeners. And all of a sudden, I noticed a slight increase. And I thought it was just going to make me feel that little bit more vital, a little bit better in the gym, know that my testosterone levels are dropping off, but I didn't think I would notice it that much, and I did. And that was just on 200 milligrams a week. So the idea, and this is just people doing TRT and HRT, there can be, for some of you, a transformation. And certainly your ability to train, because you're listening to this podcast, because you work out, you're listening to the show because you pay attention to nutrition, your ability to do certain things and recover from those things, and your ability to push certain weights in the gym will transform. And I'll use one more example, Steve, on this particular person. He's actually one of the fellas that works behind the counter, and I'll name him. I won't give you his surname, but I'll name him. Ken is 77 years of age. The year before last, he'd been 75, and he did his lifetime bench press training with me and a couple of buddies, which was 125 kilos, so 275 pounds. His only average weight and height. His joy of life, should I say, the energy he puts out into the world has always been kind of positive, certainly since I've known him these last 10 years. And he just recently had to have some blood tests, so stopped TRT, been doing TRT probably certainly since I've known him. again 200 milligrams a week, and just recently came off TRT in order to have some health tests that were required because of his age. And said he felt like shit, couldn't wait to get back on, as you can imagine, and went straight back on and actually doing a cycle right now. I think again it's something. I think there's Deca in there. There's something else, probably some sort of testosterone. And obviously, when that cycle's finished, he'll be back on TRT. And his hair, just as an example, Steve, and this is another positive, he's not completely grey or white or whatever else. There's still some healthy dark hair in amongst the grey. And he looks 10, 15 years younger than he actually is. And he's not one for the cosmetic side or using makeup or whatever. It's just from training and just from having a healthy lifestyle and just from being on TRT. And I think he's a great, I've actually used him when I've talked to people at the gym. He's a great example of someone who looks after themselves, likes to work out, has hit PRs when he was 75 and uses TRT. If we talk about the more extreme, and we'll segue now into cycle stuff, Steve. So talk a little bit about perhaps someone who just wants
Yeah.
to do a
Well,
mile cycle.
let me follow
Yeah.
up a little bit on that. So most common thing we're seeing in the 50 plus group, what happens is you're done having kids. No desire to have kids, right? I think, right? You don't want to have kids, right?
No, I don't. Not anymore. More
Yeah.
disposable income, guys. You've got the money.
Yeah, yeah, and what happens is that's one of the things is you're okay with, yeah, I'm just gonna shut myself the rest of my life. So there's TRT, there's HRT, testosterone replacement therapy, hormone replacement therapy. And when you talk TRT, you're
Yeah,
talking
you're not
about
worried about fertility, guys. You're not worried about having more children. If you are, that's a bit rare to say the least.
okay, so let me get back to what I was saying. So TRT usually refers to testosterone replacement therapy, which usually refers to just using testosterone as as your anti-aging stack. But HRT is hormone replacement therapy. And this one you can get more creative with. So it can include testosterone or you cannot include testosterone. It can include other steroids. It can include some injectables. It can include orals. And the one thing too that's very important that it can include is human growth hormone. And human growth hormone is something that dives off a cliff as you get older, much more faster than testosterone does. Like growth hormone, really, when you have low growth hormone, it's going to make it really hard to recover from your workouts. It's going to make it hard to keep the body fat off. So, luckily, Beligas has an excellent growth hormone called Beltropin, and they have it in both the kits, which are 100 IU, and they have it in the pen if you don't want to mix. The kit is going to be financially, economically the better buy because you're getting 100 IUs for a certain price, and the pen is going to be more expensive per IU, but it comes in a pen, so you don't have to worry about getting your own backwater or mixing in all that stuff. So either way, it's a really really great option. And what some guys can do who are 50 plus is they can run the HGH at their leisure. So HGH is one of those things. It's not like using testosterone, where testosterone you got to consistently be injecting it once a week or once every 2 weeks, whatever, depending on the ester you're using. So if you're using a super long ester, you can even get away with injecting it every 6 to 10 weeks. If you're using the testosterone undeclinate, the very long ester of testosterone, or you can use a testosterone sip or testosterone E and get away with injecting it once a week or once every 10 days or even once every 2 weeks with test sip. Um, but with HAH, you can use it at your leisure. So you can use it for 5 days and stop using it for a couple days, or you can use it for a week and stop using it for a week because you're getting a pulse and it's getting added to the HGH that your body is producing. But once you get older, you're not going to be producing much HGH anyway. So any little bit of HGH that you're adding is going to give you that much more of an advantage. So one of the things you could do is use anywhere from up to 2 IUs a day if you're using it for HRT. And with the Beltropin, it's so well dosed and powerful. It's not like in the old days. The old days, you'd have to run 4, 5, 6, 7 IUs just to get what the Beltropin gives you in 1 or 2 IUs. You see? So you'll notice that when you use the Beltropin, when you use it at a higher dose, you'll start noticing the carpal tunnel. You'll start noticing the side effects of the HGH. But so if you're using it for the HRT purposes, you'll want to use it at a mild dose or a low dose, you can stack it to testosterone. Now, a proper TRT dose of testosterone is anywhere from 75 milligrams up to 125 milligrams. Now, some people do something called sports TRT. And I know Mobster, you're not a big fan of it, but some people do it. And that would be a dosage that's higher, 200 milligrams, 300 milligrams, and they'll run that. But it's going to have some dire consequences to your overall health over the long term. You may feel great at first, but over time, it may come back to bite you. So if you're going to do that, you don't want to just stay on that dose for a long period of time. We got to do it
Yeah,
the right
yeah,
way because then you're going to start losing energy and having other issues come up. So that, and then with HRT, then we go a couple different HRT options. Some people like to use equipoise in their HRT.
yeah.
And equipoise is a testosterone derivative, and you can absolutely do it. You can not use testosterone. There's no rule to this.
No, no. You've argued this. It doesn't need to be one specific steroid
Yeah.
that's only used for
But
TRT. Right?
most people will stick to the testosterone. And when I say
Yes,
to use other
yes,
things, they'll look at you like you're crazy. But some people feel better on equipoise. They'll run
yeah,
150 milligrams of equipoise and like it better than running testosterone. It just depends on what you're looking for. There's no, like I said, there's no rule to it. Remember,
yeah. Yeah.
HRT is hormone replacement therapy. TRT is testosterone replacement therapy. So
Some of them also, some of the listeners will also be holding on to more muscle than other listeners. Some of them want more from training than other listeners. It's as simple as that. If it's just feeling better, then the low dose, long esterized form of testosterone makes sense. If you want to have muscle, if you want to still look good, if you want to still kick ass in the gym, even at 50 plus, then just as an example, Steve, what we discussed already, I would say low dose testosterone, HRT or TRT levels pretty much for most of the year, and then double up, go to what we call sports TRT levels, so 400 milligrams. You're already injecting that form of testosterone. You don't even have to have anything else. You're literally just doubling up the dosage. The same thing can apply to human growth hormone, like Steve said. But we had a show before, and we'll mention it again now, where we said, why is those of you, especially those of you that are doing self TRT and self HRT, why does it have to be cypionate or something else, undeclinate? Because that's what clinics are doing. It doesn't. Because the people that go to clinics aren't looking to go to the gym and bench 3 plates to 2 plates even. They are looking just to feel a little bit more vital than they used to. But you're in the gym, you're listening to the show. Your demographic is people that are looking after themselves and staying in shape, riding bikes, still playing tennis, still running up and down the beach, Steve, and hitting the gym. So therefore, your approach will differ. Just as an example here, Stephen, it occurred to me, I know one of your favorite steroids for activities is Turinabol. So talk about Turinabol as a great way of giving the older athlete alongside TRT, and there's some great T-bol
yeah.
properties products on from Beligas. So talk of that as a way
So
for
yeah, so
yeah,
what we're gonna talk about now, whether you're on TRT or HRT or you're not. I know Mobster just started TRT within the past year, but before that he was not. So up until he was 60, he was not on TRT. So what he would do is he'd cycle steroids on, cycle steroids off. Same thing with me. I'm not on TRT yet, but I'll start thinking about it once I'm in my 50s. But for now, I don't feel the need to be on it because I'm not abusing steroids where I'm shut down. So what you can do is you can cycle them on, cycle them off, or you can add them to your existing TRT or HRT. Just for full disclosure on that. But yeah, Toronto Bowl is a great option for those of you who want something very mild and something that's not going to fuck with you when it comes to athleticism. If you like to play tennis, if you like to go play golf, if you like to go swimming, if you like to bicycle, like any of these activities that older people like to do and younger people like to do them as well. I like to do all those things as well. Um,
it
and,
could be
and this
it could be the older athlete's secret weapon on the shuffleboard, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, Mobster on some days we can't record the podcast because he's got a shuffleboard tournament going on, and I have to, or he's got what is it called? What is it? Croquet? Don't you play croquet in Britain?
In your dreams.
The croquet
we,
game.
we 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 joke about me being a certain age and doing old people shit, but the reality of the situation is I could probably do those things, and I can do those things because I train and I work at just
I've
exactly like
whenever
our
I
listeners.
visit like the old people neighborhoods, whatever. Where
Yeah,
I'm
yeah. They
like,
mentioned me by name.
no, no. I mean, when I go there, I'll play shuffleboard. It's actually pretty fun.
There
It's
you go.
actually pretty
See,
fun. I like it. I don't think I,
yeah,
but yeah, Toronto Ball is a beautiful thing.
yes,
So a dosage of Toronto Ball anywhere from 20 to 40 milligrams a day, and you want to stick to, between 4 and 8 weeks on it. You don't want to run it longer because it is liver toxic. So that's a good option if you want to cycle it on and cycle it off. And another one I talked about, equipoise, is another good one. And with that
yeah,
dosage, anywhere from 200 to 400 milligrams is a good dosage of equipoise. And it's great for those of you who like to do cardio. You like to go do yoga, you like to do Pilates, you like to do boot camp style training, any of that stuff. It's a great option. Or in the gym. They're mild options. They don't fuck
yeah.
with you.
Low dose Anavar, Steve. No higher than 30 milligrams a day, guys. In fact, I would probably keep it exactly there if you're 50 plus, and you just want to have a small increase in strength over and above your HRT and TRT. Again, as we discussed on other shows, 4 to 8 weeks, just as a way of peaking your strength. And you can do this a couple of times a year, would be one. I'm looking at DECA or NPP here, Steve, only because we know that a lot of, and I've talked about the whole collagen synthesis thing with DECA. So I dispute some of the arguments I say. But what I am talking about here is that sense of well-being and especially the comfort if you are pushing it in the gym. So what people get with DECA is arguably a lubrication and a mild anti-inflammatory response in the way that your body responds to DECA or MPP. So again, I just on that thing here, Stephen. I was looking down at some of the other options. You've got Anavar Light, 10 milligrams, so that would be great. There's a couple of options, domestic and international. I would avoid the trenbolones like the plague, only because you listeners are 50 plus. If you are going to go down a hardcore route, keep it as short as possible. I mean, I know that on Beligas they do some Cialis products, Stephen. Again, I mean, we're about to find a point on it. Beligas does do Cialis, it does do Viagra. And again, this if you're going to be feeling more vital and a little bit more up for it, guys, definitely give the Beligas Viagra and the Beligas Cialis a look because that's going to be something to keep in your bedside cabinet, etc., Steve. Again, I would probably avoid DECA only because I think the likelihood, and I love DECA. I'm using DECA right now, and again, I'm 60 plus, but I'm thinking just again for the typical demographic, the possibility of DECA dick, such as it is, and the dosages that guys are going to be using might predispose a little bit too big of a percentage towards potential issues with DECA dick, Steve. So yeah, I mean, have a look. Testosterone, they got so many options, literally page one onwards, and I'm looking on the number one
Yeah,
site, Steve.
Belagas has like everything you need. They have everything you need from HGH to these steroids, injectables, oral. So many different testosterone options that you can do. And yeah, so it just depends on what direction you want to
Primo,
go.
Steve. They've got an F no Primo Bowling 100 would be a great addition, I think, at a low dose. 100 is perfect. You can take the 300 because they've got that as well, and add that in again. You don't have to use the whole meal. You could use half a meal. That would be 150 milligrams. And it's a great way of holding on to muscle tissue. And arguably, Steve, one of the potential issues, which we didn't actually mention at the beginning, is muscle wastage. So literally holding onto your hardened muscle by using a low dose version of Beligas Primobolan would be another option you can do. And again, 8 weeks I would do on that. I think the only what would you talk about cycles overall? 1 or 2 short cycles per year. I think we discussed this generally, but it's
Yeah.
specifically for 50 plus.
Yeah, and we've had some 50 plus guys on the forum. What are their favorite steroid? Mobster was what you mentioned, the DECA, and they swear by DECA. Also NPP, and Belagas has both options. Now NPP is the shorter nandrolone option. It has a nandrolone phenylpropionate ester, so that's a good option if you want to keep the cycle more short. And then there's the DECA, Belagas DECA, which is a good option to keep it longer. But the reason a lot of 50 plus like DECA is because they swear by it when it comes to how it makes their joints feel. And again, certain injuries, when you use DECA, it's not going to help you. But some injuries, it's going to help because it's going to help, lubricate those joints and make those joints just feel better, especially those who are really pushing heavy weight training and powerlifting. So we have a guy on our forum who really likes DECA, and he He
Yeah,
swears by it a lot for that reason. So, and we see a lot of a big trend of people using NPP nowadays. They like the
yeah,
flexibility of NPP. They like that you can do it for 8 weeks.
yeah.
And
Quick in, quick out.
yeah, yeah. So you don't have to worry about if it affects you. And then, as Mobster mentioned earlier, Belagas doesn't just have great steroids, but they have the great dick drugs. And what happens when you get older is now back in the 80s, if you watch some of the older movies back in the 70s and 80s, they would mention erection issues here and there. And what's
Yeah.
funny is in those days, I'm not sure what people used back then. I think they used a lot of herbals, man, if they had erection issues.
I think we used to
Yeah.
joke on the British movies, Steve, about not getting any. And
Yeah.
in America, it was sort of slightly tongue in cheek, whereas
Some
the
I,
reality is now we're far more capable because of these products like the Belagas has.
yeah, in Belagas they have you covered. They have the Viagra, which is a shorter acting option, and they have the Cialis, which is longer acting option. But also a lot of people are using this. We're seeing people who are logging, who are older, 45,
Yes.
50 plus. They're using these, they're using the Cialis, not for that reason, but they're using it to help with blood flow,
Yeah.
for heart health.
10
And
milligrams a day, half
yeah.
a pill
And they
a day.
and not only do they, it's not something they just came up with. A lot of them have said, hey, their doctors, their cardiologists that have gone to have recommended it. So that's something to talk to your cardiologist about and say, look, you need obviously something like that. You need to talk to your cardiologist. Mobster and I, or Joe Rogan, or any of these guys on YouTube don't know more about your heart health than a good cardiologist will know. So
No,
those
no,
are the
no, no.
those are the people to go to for that, and those are people who have those serious discussions with. And if they give you the green light to do it, they say, yeah, it's a smart option for you.
Let me give
And
the
go for
listeners
it.
some worthy advice, guys. So we mentioned one, or we haven't mentioned too many of the others, and the reason for that is again the impact. You're 50 plus years of age. You've already had the stresses of life on your body. So we've mostly recommended injectables over orals, with the exception of Anabol, and I believe it's Ranabol, purely and simply because we've talked about low stress options that are going to increase your ability to be more athletic in the case of Turinabol, and a little bit more power and strength in the case of Anabol. And in terms of their side effects, compared to some other orals, we haven't recommended, for example, halo testing, etc., etc. We haven't recommended orally or injectable or rubbed into your forehead. We haven't mentioned talking about harsh high dose cycles. We haven't, for example, said you should be using Tren because Tren's great for everything. No, we haven't done that. And the reason we haven't done that is we're trying to make you feel good. We want you to go out there and kick ass. We want you to hold on to muscle tissue. We want you to still be able to, quote unquote, keep up with the young bucks in the gym. What we're not trying to do is add another level of stress to your body. So, again, as I said, with regards to cycles, one of the suggestions Steve and I have made, which we think applies to the typical youth, I think especially applies here, Steve. So if you're on TRT or HRT, I would probably have you, if you come to me or Steve as some sort of client, so what would you recommend in terms of a cycle? Low dosages, most of the testosterone options that we've given you, Beligas being an absolutely great source, and we're going to talk about that momentarily. But probably I would keep these cycles relatively short. I do not want, in terms of the advice that I might give you, to see 16 or 20-week cycles, Steve. I don't think that serves anybody. And it certainly makes it a little bit harder in terms of how you'll feel afterwards, the length of time you have to PCT, and so on and so forth. And even if you're on TNT or HRT, you're going to have to do a bunch of things. You must. I think it's almost a given anyway for people that are on cycle, but I think it's even more so for 50 plus, be using herbal type organ protector products, which we discussed on other shows. We're all about keeping your health going. Going back to the Cialis and the Viagra thing, it has to be said, just to remind people, that the ED part, the erectile dysfunction part, was a side discovery. They were actually developing these products for blood pressure as a treatment, and I think specifically Viagra, where they realized that the quality of erection in the older people in the trials was actually better, and that ended up being the number one selling dick drug in the world. But of course, they were literally looking at blood pressure pills and tablets to put 50 plus males on, and so on and so forth. So, just as an example like that, you still need to eat clean, guys. You will get the benefits, the same benefits we discuss on other shows. You still need to be consistent in your training. I'd like to see, arguably, Steve, perhaps, and I should probably do this, and I do get my daily steps in. Try to do other activities outside the gym. So get your steps in, riding a bike, playing golf, hitting the shuffleboard, whatever. Let's talk about Beligas specifically, Steve. I'll start with the simple fact that Beligas is a Belgian company, and I've mentioned this on other shows when we talked about it, but I think it's worth repeating. That is an actually licensed, proper pharmaceutical company. When we talk about big pharma and named companies that used to produce steroids for the mass market, for hospitals, for health conditions, we talked about companies that were part of big pharma. Beligas is a proper pharmaceutical company based in Belgium that would be open to government inspectors, requires licenses, etc., to produce products, and so on and so forth. How those products are used around the world, listener, is entirely up to you. And obviously, you can buy these through recognized resellers and distributors. But the simple fact of the matter is, when we talk about most companies, they are not a big licensed pharmaceutical company. Beligas is. There's probably a website you can look at and you can see photographs of the plant and all that kind of stuff, which is not necessarily the case with some of the other food sources that we talk about. So yeah, there's that, Steve. When I was talking about government inspectors, I know how this shit works. Literally, they can drive up to the gates, show their permission for who they are, drive in, park up their car, get into the clean gear, and walk into the processing plant and take products from the line, Steve. Take the raw materials from the line, go to the lab and take tested products from the lab and take that out of the factory, take it down to the local government facilities and test it. We have something in the United Kingdom called trading standards. You have similar in terms of the Food and Drug Administration in the States. And the way that that's supposed to work is organizations like that can go to food plants and chemical plants, and in this case, pharmaceutical plants, and take product from the line. That doesn't happen with most UGLs. It doesn't happen with most sources, but it does happen when you are a proper pharmaceutical company. So talk about how great Beligas is in that regard, Steve, and then we'll talk specifically about what we like about them as a pharma company for steroids, etc.
Well, there's a reason professional bodybuilders use them. There's a reason. They provide fast shipping, they have excellent service, and they're available at all legitimate source resellers that are out there for a reason. Resellers, these high quality sources that resell them, would not sell them in the first place if they were not high quality. And at the end of the day, they are a trusted brand. When you order the products, you know what you're getting. The Beltropin HGH is one of the most widely used HGHs that you'll find. A lot of people, there's a demand for it. If it goes out of stock, people freak out. Oh my God, I should have bought more. I should have bought more. That's when you know the product is good. It's just like your favorite food at the grocery store. You go there and you're looking for it and it's out of stock. And you're like, man, this sucks. It's out of stock. I have to drive to another store across town because I really want that. It's the same thing. So it's very, very important to use high quality sources, and it's very important to know what you're using is legit. And we really, we want you to use legitimate products. And Monster and I, we won't put anything in our body that we don't trust. And I'm going to be upfront and honest with you guys. HGH, I've used HGH a couple times, and I'm going to probably be using it at some point within the next year. I'm gonna do a run of HGH, maybe for 3 or 4 months. Guess what? I'm gonna be using Mobster. I'm gonna be using Beltropin HGH from Belagas. And
Make sure listeners you come on to the forums and check out the log that Steve will almost
yeah,
certainly be running when he does that to see the results he gets, to see
yeah.
how the turnout and the response that he has to Beligas products.
And I'm not going to be running a lot. I'm just going to be running a really tiny dose, maybe one and a half IU's. But that's the nice thing about Belagas products is you don't have to run them at crazy dosing. Now, back in the day, when we would have to buy HGH, we would have to run it 5 IU's, 6 IU's because it was low quality. And that's what guys would have to use. You can go back and look at and they still wouldn't get side effects. But if you run the Belagas HGH at 3 or 4 IU's, I had a client do this. They're like, "Oh, I have carpal tunnel, Steve," and I'm like, "Yeah, because you're running it at a really high dose. You don't have
Yes,
to run it at a
yes,
high dose because it's
no,
such high quality, and the prices are
yes,
so affordable.
Super
Unbiased.
competitive. I've just
Yep.
looked while we've been talking. They're right on point with their pricing, and that's without special deals, etc. They're right where they need to be. You know, it's a quality product. Don't worry, guys. And the only thing I'm just going to finish off slightly tongue in cheek is that we'll have a whip round for Steve's 50th, and we're buying a shuffleboard amongst us. So there you go, guys. Listen, 50 plus. We think you're going to love this show. I'd like to hear your comments if you are 50 plus, your approach to training, your approach to performance enhancement. Has it changed because you've got older? Let us know in the comments below. Come onto the forums. Please note, as always, we are not doctors and the opinion are ours. It is our view based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.